Well, thanks everyone for joining today. Welcome to the session, the 2026 Founder Reset for better books and bigger shred. So, Eric and I are really excited to be here today, and thank you all for joining us. Hope you're having a nice sunny Tuesday. I forgot what day it is for a second there, but awesome. So, I'm Lauren Valier. I am the co-founder and managing partner of GrowWise. We are a shred tax credit consulting firm that uses our AI-driven platform to simplify the process for our clients. I'll pass it over to Eric for a quick introduction, then we'll get into the good stuff.
Cool. Yeah, I'm Eric Samur. I'm a CPA, CA, a co-founder and principal of Zen Books. So we're an online accounting firm. We're kind of leading the charge on the tech side of things in accounting in Canada. We've got loads of like SaaS clients and tech clients, and so when Lauren proposed to kind of talk about this, I think this was a perfect fit. So yeah, there's loads to kind of talk about because we handle taxes, we handle bookkeeping, accounting for our clients, payroll, tax planning. And so Lauren had some really good things to share about Shred. And so together, I think this will be hopefully super useful. Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome.
So basically, we know 2025 was hard. 2025, there was a lot going on this year. Thankfully, it's over. We know that, your 2025 is probably still a bit of a mess. It hasn't quite, you haven't gone through the whole process of finishing your books for 2025 yet, and that's okay. Usually what ends up happening for people who file shred for the first or even second time, it's usually kind of a scramble. It's not quite a system yet, and I have a little inclination that that's maybe where you're at right now. And so there are some really good ways to systemize this, and so we wanted to walk through that with you today. And so basically, a lot of the times, a lot of this is done, reactively, and so that's where you kind of miss out on a lot of like the big shred claims and controlling your costs and margins. And so we've got some very tactical kind of ways of looking at that. And I think big picture here, it's not about making sure that your books are perfect or that your shred claim is 1,000% accurate. It's about making sure that you have control over what's going on and what happened in 2025 so that like 2026, you can have control over how that will be tracked and what's going on so that when year end comes time or when year end kind of comes around, you're in full control. You know exactly what's happening and everything's good. So ask some questions throughout. I know, Lauren was saying there's a Q&A available. Lauren and I are both good to like just ask us questions throughout. Don't just wait until the end. There will be some time at the end if like somehow you still have questions at the end, but like just interrupt us, send us the thing through the chat or the Q&A thing or raise your hand, whatever. We'd much rather answer your questions in the moment. It's still a very kind of like tactical kind of workshop here that we're doing. We do have like a good amount of people on the webinar today, but it's enough that we can still have those like one-on-one sessions. So to some extent, so just bring up these little things. Happy to chat about it throughout. So um, yeah, basically, what I'll say here is why are we even doing this session? So I think the idea is that we recognize that when it comes to shred, when you're actually managing your shred properly, and when we can actually go through and make sure your 2025 is organized and planning for 2026, you won't miss out on really good tax planning opportunities. You won't waste your time on reactive bookkeeping and year-end cleanups because that's the big stress. Like that's where you're gonna get things wrong. That's where, you kind of dread accounting, you dread shred claims. That's the big no-no. And there's really good ways of doing things so that it lowers your stress. You make it as part of your system. And also at the same time, by actually doing these things on an ongoing basis, you'll be able to make decisions using real information. And so, but we'll go through it, but basically by tracking your shred properly throughout the year, you're also tracking your margins better. And so that is a big win to make your decisions throughout the year. Um, and one of the things Lauren will show is that basically by not having that organized kind of nature, it leads to much lower shred claims. And we'll explain that in depth here, but like the fact that you are actually organized will maximize your shred. And so we'll go through that. And the the big thing when you talk to like the people who have claimed shred and then they stopped, a lot of the times it's because it was super stressful. They weren't sure, like they just dreaded it. It was like, well, it's such a pain to go through. Um, but the thing is that if you actually plan for it ahead of time, it's not a big pain because you know what's going to happen. You plan for it accordingly. You track things proactively, and so basically, it's about staying organized, and we'll walk you through that. Um, I think Lauren, you wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about specific documentation for
Yeah.
SRED.
Yeah, I'm going to do a quick poll here actually, just to get a
Yeah.
sense of where people are at with shreds. So I'm just going to launch this now. So it's basically just a quick question of what is your shred familiarity? Have you filed shred, never filed shred, filed in the previous company? Are you currently filing shred or preparing it internally? Or are you currently filing shred with a consultant? So this will kind of help us understand where to start with some of these conversations. So if
Mhm.
everyone could just take a second and pop their answer in the chat in the poll there.
It's kind of cool to see the answers rolling in here.
Yeah.
This is exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. There's just a few folks that haven't answered yet. If you could just pop your response in the poll here, I'll give it a couple more seconds.
It looks like more than half have answered already. That's pretty good. Yeah,
Yeah.
get your answer in real quick so we can make sure to custom tailor this conversation here to your
Yeah.
actual needs here. We don't want to like talk to the wrong
Yeah.
audience.
Okay, awesome. So I'm seeing quite a few have never filed before, and then several have are currently filing either with internally or with a consultant. So awesome. I'll end that poll.
That's good
Thanks
to know.
for
Yeah.
putting that in there. That really helps us understand a bit more about where to start here. So understanding that some people have never filed before, this might be a 101 session a little bit, but some have also filed. I'll kind of try to tailor the conversation a little bit. So in general, SRED is meant to fund innovation in Canada. It's meant to fund technical problem solving and challenging innovation. And how you file SRED is it's built on evidence. You file at the end of your fiscal year with your taxes, which is why it made sense for us to be here together, Eric and I. And SRED is really built on evidence. It's not built on memory. So if you have messy data, you're not keeping track of your trials, your failures, your projects, your processes, you're going to have low confidence at the end of the year of what's eligible, what's not eligible, who spent what time on what projects. And when you have low confidence in messy data, that means that your claims will inherently be more conservative because you will not be able to be more, risky or claim a larger amount because you won't have the proof to document that and to be able to substantiate that in your SRED application. So one example of that is if you have a kind of a gray area cost where you have a person spending roughly 3 months on researching, they're researching, what you should move forward with a specific project. If that's well documented, you have records of what they're spending their time on, you have records of what they're specifically researching, what their learnings are, what research they're doing, that would definitely be eligible for SRED. But if there's no documentation of that, the only kind of knowledge that is gained is in that person's head and there's no records, there's no time tracking to prove that's how they spent their time, it's going to be extremely challenging to prove to the CRA that that person spent that time on SRED activities. So it's very challenging to therefore include that as a SRED expense. And if that person was spending 3 months at 100K a year salary, that's $25,000 as a SRED eligible expense, which means around $17,000 as a refund that you're leaving on the table due to lack of documentation. So the key here, and we'll get into this a little later in the presentation, is around if you do not document SRED properly and you don't keep those records and keep clean financials, at the end of the year, you will pay the price and your SRED claim will be lower. Your filings will it'll take longer to prepare that filing, which will delay your cash refund. And another thing Eric and I were talking about before this was if you're adjusting all of your expenses at the end of the year and you're going back and trying to retroactively
Oh
figure
yeah.
out which expense was related to which project or which contractor worked on what when, all of that is going to be relying on your memory, not
Mm.
evidence. So it's going to really reduce your SRED claim and reduce your confidence, right? So I don't know any startups that want to delay their cash or have lower cash come in from the government. We all want to take full advantage of the government program. So this session is really going to get into how to document, how to bookkeep, how to do your accounting practices to maximize your SRED claims and maximize your profitability in your business.
Yeah, that's great. I think, it comes down to as well just actually having books that are in order. And I wish there was some sort of app that just did it perfectly. And trust us, like we're at the forefront of technology and accounting in Canada here. Like, and there's a lot of promising apps that have really good marketing, but they don't quite deliver the value of like actually making sure you're doing the routine. So you need to get bank statements. You need to make sure that you're reconciling your books on a regular basis. Otherwise, none of these apps can even do anything. You need to categorize those expenses consistently going forward. So one of the things that sometimes like business owners get, I guess, tripped up on is that they put they're trying to be super specific with a large chart of accounts and trying to be super, oh, it goes over here and maybe over here, just make it consistent period over period, and that'll give you the best like information as to like where your margins are going. And because when expenses are in different buckets from month to month, it makes it really hard to compare and see where you're trending. And so that's a big thing. You want to be able to identify one-off costs. So versus recurring, because if something is recurring, that goes towards your burn rate, that goes towards your valuation to some extent, But if it's a one-off cost, it's more of a one-off investment, and it can be separately identified as like, well, that won't happen next year. That's just happen one time. And so, and specifically more towards the shred stuff, you want to make sure your payroll account is super tidy. So, you'll shred, Lauren will go through this, but like there's a big thing in shred on whether someone is a salaried person, a contractor, whether you're getting dividends. So you do want to make sure that your payroll account is tidy, as in like you've paid the remittances, they're up to date, it's reconciled. You want to make sure your T4s are reconciled for 2025 so that when you do your actual SRED claim, it can be verified because CRA doesn't like to give you money like as a refund when like you actually still owe money in other accounts. So that needs to be super tidy. When it comes to, let's just assume you're the owners here for the company. When it comes to the owners, you probably want to be on salary instead of dividends. When you're going to be taking some SRED claims, because the CRA kind of sees it as like if you're on salary, you're like a worker working in your business, whereas salary, you're just profiting off the business's earnings. And so it's a lot harder to even get any money as dividends. I don't even think you can. Whereas salary is where the money's at for an owner. And so it's kind of similar for even the people that are kind of helping you out with various things. So if you're using like a subcontractor, there's different rates than if you actually have them as salaried employees. So if you have some people on your team that you're like, oh, well, I'll just hire them as a contractor, but they work exclusively for you. Just add them as a salaried staff and you'll get an even higher refund rate. So, people want to save the CPP, EI or whatever, but like there's way bigger benefits in like claiming your shred. So those are big things to kind of keep in mind. Um, what else we got here? Oh yeah, this is just regular kind of like checklist stuff. So, it comes down to like actually making sure that you have a monthly cadence around your books. So it's not, exciting. It's not a thing you're going to look forward to, but it's a thing you need to do to be organized. And when the thing is, which Lauren kind of like referred back to at one point, but if you only do your books once per year, then you're going to be making a bunch of just adjusting journal entries at the end of the year to say, oh yeah, 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 I think that was that project over here, and maybe it was this, and truth is, it'll probably be wrong to some extent, but like if it's done in that month or even in that week, you're doing it based on the most like, the latest information that you have. And so you're coding it with the best intent. And to some extent, CRA understands that. Because if at the end of the year you just go back and you're like, oh, by the way, all of these things actually happened a year ago, the CRA can sniff a little bit and be like, what are you talking about? Like, but if you coded it a certain way at the beginning, like in the moment when the transaction happened, and then you review it at the end of the month, and it also made sense, and then year end came and you reviewed it and it still made sense. CRA sees that and they're like, okay, well, they have a cadence. They know what's going on. They were in the moment. They made a decision. There's a little bit more confidence in your claims. And I think that that's difficult to quantify, but it allows for better claims. And you want to make sure that you look for anomalies. So sometimes you can go through your expenses and say like, wait, hold on, what was this big bill that we paid that was like 5 grand? And and in the moment, if you're doing it like closer to the date, you can start to track and be like, oh no, no, that contractor actually did do some work for this other project. They did do some research, but maybe they didn't like actually write it on their invoice. right? So you can go back and be like, hey, can you like just make sure to write that on the invoice because you did do some work on this. It'll help us with our shred claim. And so you can do that in the moment, but if you try and do that at the end of the year, good luck trying to find that contractor again and get them to change their invoice from their last fiscal year. You're not going to claim the right shred. So I think in a way, like I wish there was a magic bullet of a software that does this, but it comes down to actually just having habits, looking at your books and moving from it, whether that's weekly or monthly, and making decisions. And we'll go through the more tactical stuff, like I said, around the invoices and stuff. But like if you just set yourself a money date on a monthly basis, you will be much further ahead. Um, and I think what I was going to add here was just, excuse me, just one second here. I got a cough. I've got some tea as well. I think Lauren's kind of sick too, so
I am, yeah.
hopefully maybe everyone's going through this right now. But um, what we've seen over and over is that people kind of treat the bookkeeping as an afterthought. But I think the truth is that if you're claiming shred, you do not have that like luxury. You will make way more money if you're actually dealing with your bookkeeping on a weekly or monthly basis. And so it the truth is as well is that when you're doing that, when you're actually tracking what is potential research or development or what's to this project and that project, that actually allows you to track your profitability by product or project on a regular basis at the same time. So you're getting a double win because now that you have your profitability by project or by product, you can make decisions to say, look, this project is not something we should keep doing. We keep putting money in it, and there's just no realistic opportunity to make any revenue from this. Or you say, this is super good. Like we keep making money on this. Let's double down. And you don't have to wait until the end of the year to make those decisions. So there's big wins from doing that. And I think Lauren, you're going to mention a few points here.
Yeah, as well, kind of on that visibility by product or process, that's really required from a shred perspective to be able to track expenses back to a specific project, back to a specific technical challenge. So the more information you have, the larger your claim will be, and the more, proof you'll be able to have if you do get audited. So what we see a lot of the time, a big mistake is people will come to us and go, yeah, we started last year and we had a great year. We paid a bunch of people's salaries, we scaled quickly. And okay, let's apply to shred. And I'm like, okay, great, amazing. But like, where's your proof? Who spent time on what? What experiments did you do? What tests did you do? And they're like, yeah, nothing, no proof. We just did it. And that's just such a common thing. Like people don't think about it proactively. So I hope the folks that are here, maybe the ones that haven't claimed shred yet, are taking this proactive approach that thinking about shred, it's the same point Eric just made a couple slides ago, is I truly wish that shred, was something that could just be at the end of the year you apply. I guess for better or for worse, I wouldn't have a job if it was that way. Um,
You'd find
but
something else, I'm sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
But shred is really one of those things. Same with bookkeeping and keeping up with your financials. You either spend hours and hours and weeks at the end of the year reconciling and going back and cleaning up the mess, or you spend 5 to 20 minutes a month on these things to organize and keep up to date. So it's just so much better to do it throughout the year and to actually have that planning. We often talk to founders on the note of Eric mentioned earlier of contractors versus employees versus the refund rates for Shred. I'll just explain that a little bit more while we're here. So, employees, if you're paying an employee a T Ford salary, they receive Shred at a rate of 65%. So, if you pay them $100,000, you can get a Shred refund for $65,000 at the end of the year, assuming they're doing fully Shred eligible work. If you're paying a contractor that same 100,000, your Shred refund will only be 40,000. So it's a huge difference. It's almost double between paying an
It's
employee and
wild.
paying a
Yeah.
contractor. So it's really significant that you understand these things and you can go into your year understanding, okay, that contractor is not eligible. So we might not want to pay them as an employee, but the work this contractor is doing is fully eligible for shred. So let's actually hire someone and onboard them as a team member. It can be on a contract. It can be on a, 1 year contract employee, as long as they're paid a salary that's eligible for the higher rate. And dividends are not eligible at all for shred. So you want to think about these things ahead of time and really just organize your finances accordingly. You don't want to rely too much on messy spreadsheets and unorganized data. If you're building strong spreadsheets that have the right information, then that can definitely be a great tool for Shred. But it's always good to just make sure you're tracking the right information, which we'll get into in a little bit here. And then not documenting Shred experiments properly. There's two really key parts of Shred. It's the financial side and the technical side. I'm going to explain a little bit more. I think it's in a slide or two, a lot more about what's required from each one. But the most important part of Shred is that you can actually prove that the work qualifies for Shred. So if you don't have that proof of the experiments and the proof of the challenges you face, you're not going to get any of your expenses reimbursed, regardless of how well they were tracked.
And also, Lauren, I don't know if you saw there's a Q&A, there's a question that showed
Oh,
up.
okay. Yeah.
I think you'd be good to answer this one.
Okay. If I've never together for 2 years on an idea. This might be something we could potentially take offline. It's a bit of a specific question about a case for a company. Um,
Right.
so just to kind of clarify, the first point is about the timeline. So with Shred, you want to apply every year with your business tax filing. That's the best way to access Shred. But Shred actually does have a longer deadline than your typical taxes, which is, I believe, Eric, 6 months after your
Yeah.
fiscal year end.
Yeah.
For Shred, you actually have a year and a half. So if
Mhm.
your fiscal year ended a year and a half ago, you can still apply for Shred for that year. You just amend your business tax filing and you can tax Shred on at that point. So that would be the first question to answer here is how long ago did this happen? Um, for Shred, the business needs to be incorporated to apply. So if your business was not incorporated at the time you were doing that work, then you would not be eligible to receive Shred at the higher rate or at a refundable rate. So it wouldn't likely make sense if your business was not incorporated. Um, but and if you don't have evidence as well, it's quite a challenge. So maybe we can take this question offline, look more a bit into your specific situation. But I would say in general, probably not if it was a while ago and you don't have as much documentation, but happy to have a further conversation. Like Eric and I were mentioning, Shred is so specific to your case. So
Yeah.
it is kind of hard to give general statements, but
Yeah. But I
happy
think
to
it
have
is
a
useful,
conversation.
like you going through the nuances like that to everyone so that everybody
Yeah.
understands, like, what are some of the iffy points and what are the, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
this is
Kind
not a
of the
problem,
checklist I go through
Yeah.
in my head. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. How do you see it, when you go through it? So
Yeah.
that's good. Um, yeah.
Sorry. It is that time of year. I think everybody's sick. Um, so yeah, Shred, as Eric and I have been really painting the picture, Shred fits in really cleanly into your financial systems. It's not independent. It really aligns well. So when your books are clean, claims are easier, they're faster, they're larger, it's less stressful. It's just such a simpler process when you take the time throughout the year to clean up your books. And you'll benefit tenfold. Like you will get a larger refund, you will have less troubles with the CRA, your process will take you less time. So it's really a full process to build clean books, clean accounting, and larger shred claims. So, where Shred breaks down in practice, probably the largest thing is that time tracking is done retroactively. So, in a perfect world, I always say this, in a perfect world, Shred time tracking would be done every day. Every employee would explain, everything they did that day and what projects it relates to. But I am a real person that lives in the real world, and I understand that is very, very, very rarely going to happen. What I always say is for Shred, you do need some form of documentation that identifies which employees are working on which projects at which point throughout the year. So, what I would say as a practical system that's not daily time tracking is bi-weekly, like every other week or once a month, have your employees spend 30 minutes on a Friday afternoon and just identify of this past, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or a month, what percentage of their time was spent on which activities. So I spent 20% of my time researching this for this project, and just a quick sentence there is enough. I spent 50% of my time testing and iterating this specific activity, and these are the variables I tested, and this is what, just a sentence about what happened. And that truly will not take more than 30 minutes a month. Like I don't want you to overestimate how much this effort this is going to take. Put it in your calendars, put a recurring task, like Eric was mentioning. these things are built on habits. There's no one-stop shop that's going to come in and just be the perfect answer. They take habits. I even myself put calendar blocks, for my monthly activities that I need to do. If not, we'll all forget, right?
Yeah.
So just build those systems that you go and spend 15 minutes every 2 weeks, 30 minutes a month, and just do that time tracking. And then the missing technical proof. I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean in the next slide here, but you need to be able to prove, most importantly, that the project does qualify for SRED. And without the evidence that you did testing, that you did iterating, that you've solved a clear challenge, it's extremely challenging to access SRED and to maximize your claim. And then you really want that link between spend and activities. One thing where Eric has been mentioning is, tracking expenses as they come up. One activity I wanted to mention here is if you hire a contractor, it's really important that in that contract, in that agreement, when you hire them, you actually note that you are the one that is going to be claiming SRED on that expense.
Right.
So if you don't, that contractor in theory could go claim SRED for their own expenses, for their company to pay their employees their time. So it's really important, and we see this happen a lot with early companies, they don't think about it. Contractors, if they're doing technical work, they want to claim SRED on that expense as well, but you can't both claim SRED on the same expense. So it's important as giving advice to you in your company is make sure that you're the one that's able to claim SRED on those contractors. And that will be a good link between the spend and the project and the expense for contractors. One thing that Eric and I were talking about before this is audits. So SRED audits, just for a bit of background for those that haven't claimed SRED, in about 90% of cases, SRED claims get approved without a further audit. The CRA reviews them and they get approved and you get your cash back after your fiscal year end. In about 5 to 10% of cases, they'll do what they call a SRED audit. And this is when they dive a little deeper into your project. They ask you very specific questions about what work did you do? How can you prove this? Where's your evidence? And there's a higher rate of these audits for first-time claimants. And that sometimes deters people from applying. But Eric and I were talking about this before. You shouldn't stress about an audit. You should just prepare for an audit. If you don't get audited in your first year, that's amazing. There are some people that never get audited. In general, it happens, every 5 or so years, 5 or 10 years. But it's a higher likelihood in your first year. So don't stress about this audit. Take the advice we're giving you today and just be prepared for an audit. It's a simple distinction that will really change your mindset. If you don't get audited, phenomenal. So happy for you. If you do, as consultants, we're right there with you to walk you through that process, support you in that, whole conversation. But building the evidence and building these systems throughout the year will prepare you for an audit so that an audit is actually not that big of a deal. It's just preparing documents that you've already created. It's putting together some numbers, and it doesn't need to be this huge big thing. I'm sure everyone has heard a horror story about a SRED audit that was just an absolute nightmare. But don't get too caught up in those stories because if you're prepared, I've seen SRED audits take like 5 hours to prepare for and go swimmingly. So if you have these systems in place, it's still a little bit of time, of course, but it doesn't need to be this nightmare that some people make it out to seem.
Yeah.
And the last point there is SRED is evidence and evidence is SRED. So the more information you have, the better.
And if I could quickly add a note, Lauren, was just that I think the cases where people are actually stressed about the audit are when at the like their support is that at the end of the year they like looked back and they're like, oh yeah, that person's put 10% of their time
Yeah.
towards this activity. But then it's like, okay, but do you have timesheets? Do you have something?
Yeah.
And so they make the claim, they get audited, and then the auditor's like, well, wait, so how is it that it's 10%? Like, show us more. And
Hmm.
then that's stressful because now you got to be like, wait, hold on, like how do I show that like in November the
Yeah.
last week they were doing this thing like and that's
Hmm.
stressful. That's the part people hate. But when you're like actually dealing with it on a weekly, monthly basis, like the audit is not stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. That's really like the key message we want everyone to get out of this is just if you prepare, it's not this huge stressful event. It's like, yay, I'm getting my SRED money. Awesome.
Yeah. And then I was just gonna say, Lauren, if there's a picture that you should take right now for this session, for anyone listening, this is the slide that's very useful. Okay.
Yeah.
So take out your phone. I mean, it's obviously being recorded here, but like this is important, like more technical of like how do you actually track SRED
Mhm.
properly according to Lauren here, who does this all the time.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk for a minute here, so apologies in advance for my voice going on and on. But this is really the key, like one of the main takeaways we wanted you guys to get out of this session. Um, so in general, there's not really one size fits all for shred tracking. There's not a process that works the same for everyone. What's really important, and I want to start by explaining what the CRA actually needs from you if you were to get audited, and you should always apply assuming you're going to get audited because it's better to be more prepared than underprepared. So if you understand what you need to track or why you need to track it, what you need to track, then you can understand the practical aspects of it. So the first thing is you need to be able to answer three technical questions. The SRED claim itself actually only has three technical questions that you need to answer, and the rest is related to the financials. So the first is what is the technical uncertainty? What is the specific technical challenge that you're facing that is unique, that is an uncertainty that's not been done by somebody else? It is a true challenge that requires innovation. You can't just go hire a consultant that does this every day. This is new innovation. This is a specific area of knowledge gap. So, what is that uncertainty? And just when you start a project, having a quick like Google Doc or even an email that just documents those specific technical challenges, that is enough really to identify, what needs to happen to address this gap. And the second question, which is really the core of SRED, is what are you doing to address the challenge? So this comes down to what specific experiments, testing, iterations, problem solving, design work, failures, iterations, what are you doing to address the challenge? And that is the core of SRED, is that the projects require iterations. They require, we say, like our little joke at GrowWise is SRED funds the struggle. So what are you struggling with? What is the struggle? What is involved in the struggle? And that's really the core of SRED. Um, then the kind of third question is what did you learn from your experiments? You don't need to solve the problem you set out to solve. If you want to improve a process by 10% efficiency and you got 8, that does not mean it doesn't qualify for SRED because you learned how to get to 8% efficiency, right? So you need to learn something. If you didn't learn anything or gain any new knowledge that wasn't publicly available, you likely didn't have SRED to begin with, right? If you didn't learn anything or anything at all in that process, then it's a question of eligibility. So in general, the CRA needs to be able to see the answers to each of these questions. Project notes, test results, failed attempts, design changes, experiment documentation. It doesn't actually matter the format of this information. When you get audited, you can pull together, Excel spreadsheets, meeting notes, emails, Jira files, GitHub commits, scribbles on a notebook. It doesn't need to be in a pretty package, but you do need to have the answers to these questions somewhere. And then kind of how you substantiate those three questions is who spent time and when on these activities and what costs correlate with these activities. And that's really where the claim maximization comes from. And so kind of going back to the time tracking, you need to be able to show who spent time on these activities. For the CRA's application, you actually show monthly which employees spent activity, which employees spent which percentage of time in each month, and that's how we calculate the total cost related to SRED. Um, and then you need to be able to show of materials, of contractors, or any other expenses. Now, capital costs are included in SRED. So what costs correlate with what activities? So there's a few options here around how we track. So the option A is to build systems into your existing processes. So that can be, monthly or biweekly time tracking, where people allocate their time, as we've discussed. It can also be building systems into your existing processes, such as if you use Jira, adding tags into your Jira files. If you use GitHub, adding a layer where you tag SRED or you tag a specific project onto those code repositories or Git commits. Um, Building a layer kind of on top of your existing systems just to identify, this person spent this much time in the lab this day or coding on this project. And that relates back to this specific project. If you build those systems in throughout the year, that's what will make it so simple at the end of the year just to pull out everything tagged with a specific project or everything tagged as SRED. That's really the 5 minutes a day that will save you the hundreds of hours at the end of the year in identifying SRED And that's what will maximize your claim. It's so much easier to build those systems in versus to try to identify them at the end of the year. And then kind of the option B here, we've built a platform at GrowWise that stores all the information relating to Shred in one location. And we've built the functionality to actually call you and your team members with our AI voice agents on a schedule that you choose. So that could be weekly, biweekly, monthly. We'll call you or ask for a quick update related to each project. And that will just be, what have you been working on? What tests have you done? What challenges have you faced? And that is actually pulled into our database and stored as substantiating evidence so that at the end of the year, we've kind of already gathered most of the information related to your shred claim. We also kind of the cool functionality we built at GrowWise is the ability for you to dump your data in from every source. As I mentioned, you can just put in tags in Jira. You can put in, code tracking in GitHub. At the end of the year, you can dump all of that information into our system and we'll pull out the pieces that are shred eligible, pull out those projects rather than having to comb through with a fine-tooth comb at the end of the year to identify them. So, building your systems so that you track throughout the year or using our systems, either way, you need to have the ability to answer those five core questions when you apply for shred. So there's really not like a one size fits all. But the more information you keep, the more you'll be able to claim. The more evidence you have, the stronger your claim will be and the larger it will be. So that's really the core of shred tracking. And I'm always happy to have a conversation with someone really specifically to what your current systems are, what you should track, how you should track it. And it is really unique to each company. So always happy to have that conversation with anyone here.
Yeah, I don't see any questions or comments or things in the chat. Throw it in here, guys. Like, let's get
Yeah,
some
yeah.
specifics. If you
Yeah,
have something that's kind of on your mind, you're not sure if you should ask it, just do it.
yeah,
We want to make it a two-way street. So,
yeah, for sure. And just kind of the last thing is tracking increases your claim size. So you won't miss expenses. You'll have stronger technical narratives. You'll be at a lower risk of reduction or denial during an audit. So I think Eric was mentioning earlier, like if you say John spent 50% of his time throughout the year on this project and you get audited, the CRA will ask, I've done these audits before, they'll ask you, how did you get to that 50% number? And if your answer is, we guessed, or we think he spent this much time, we're not really sure, they will reduce that amount. They will either reduce it or they'll slash your claim entirely and you'll get denied. And that's just bad for so many reasons. It puts a red flag on your file that you might get audited again in the future. It's just you need to have data to back these decisions up. And always happy to explain a little bit more about how practically we can get those numbers and get the data-driven answers. But it's more data is more proof is larger claims.
and I mean, on the side of the books here, like you do want to just make sure that your shred claim is defensible. That's kind of the idea. And the cleaner your books are, the more you're up to date on your bookkeeping, the more you have like those timesheets, the better it'll be. And I feel like we're just repeating ourselves, but it's a thing that Lauren and me see all the time. That people want like a magic bullet of some sort of like magic software that deals with it. You need habits. You need to have your books in order every week, every month, and that'll be the magic bullet. The other big leverage here is that by actually tracking your expenses on a regular basis towards Shred, you're also actually tracking your costs properly, and you can make decisions based on that because you can say like, well, hold on, like why are we spending that much of Steve's time? Because Steve's at 100 grand a year, and it's getting expensive now. I can tell that it's expensive because I didn't realize he was spending half of his time on this. Maybe we don't want to spend half of Steve's time on this because it's not that big of an opportunity. So maybe you lower your costs
Hmm.
quicker. Or maybe you're like, wait, why doesn't Steve spend more time? I thought he was spending 75% of his time on this.
Hmm.
Like we need to accelerate this. Like what's going on? And so you can make these decisions only if you're actually tracking for shred. And so you get the double win from these kind of like tracking to make these good decisions. And so we've gone through a bunch of different stuff on the session today. We're going to send you, we have like a 7-step financial checklist to run through. You'll get your email. It's going to have this specific thing included here. So it's basically what we talked about, maybe a little bit more detail on some tactical stuff. So I invite you to check your email. It'll take up a few minutes here after our session today, but It'll go very specifically, an actual checklist on what you can do to keep your 2025 in order now, and then it'll help you stay organized for 2026. And so by doing that, really what you're doing is that, you're allowing yourself to be in a position to be nice to investors, right? Like if you're doing some shred, you're often in a position where you might be seeking investors either now or in the future. And I can tell you, investors want a clean set of books. They want to make sure that like any kind of big claims you've done for Shred have either been very well substantiated, you've worked with a good consultant to kind of do it so that they don't carry that risk if something were to happen, right? They want to make sure that you have a clean process in place. They don't want you to just be like, "Oh no, I rely on this like software that I think does it, but I'm not sure how it works." No, no, no. They want to know that you know what's going on, that you know how it works, and that you have good habits. And that will go a very long way. You also should be documenting your assumptions on how you made these decisions, whether that's for Shred or for changes throughout the year on, hey, like in March, we decided to pivot and we stopped that project because we decided to go into this other direction. The more you document these things, the better you explain it to an investor, the better your valuation, the more money you'll get. And it just goes back down to the basics, you know? And so I think what we put together, we have this like 30, 60, 90-day kind of plan that Lauren and I put together. Essentially, 30 days, that's, the end of January. We think you can clean up 2025 here, set yourself a baseline. I'm hoping that, part of your New Year's resolution was to have clean books. I'm not disillusioned. It probably isn't, but it should be something that sets yourself up properly for 2026. And I think Lauren has a plan for the 60 days that she wanted to walk
Yeah.
through.
Yeah, if you want to avoid the stress that you felt over, the holiday season and this time next year, what you can do now just to set yourself up for success is implement these new bookkeeping strategies that we've talked about today. Implement the Shred workflows. Reach out to me and talk about, are you eligible for Shred and how we can maximize your claim going forward. Build these workflows in. I promise you, it's worth it to spend the bit of time kind of consistently throughout the year. Then, have these systems in place. You'll truly reap the rewards at the end of the year. You'll have less stress. Most folks we talk to have a December 31st year end, so we're kind of assuming that you do based on this conversation today. But regardless of your year end, even if you're in the middle of your fiscal year right now, it's still a really good time to implement those new strategies and build these workflows so that your claim is larger going forward. So it's never too late to build these new systems. And I find it's always a good time of year to do a reset and just to take a moment to build the systems for the year ahead.
And and we find like the 90-day kind of timeline is a good one because basically by the 60 days, you've kind of like have started to actually track your shred properly.
Mhm.
And then once you're able to do that, then you can, by the 90-day mark, you can actually track your margins. You can start to track cash flow because you know how much money is actually going out for various projects. And you can be ready, we think, in 90 days is a good timeline to actually get ready for a claim so that you can prepare ahead of time. And then when audit time comes around, whatever, you're prepared, you send them all the files, you move away, or you not move away, you stay in Canada. But like you can, rest assured everything is handled, and if you don't get audited, fantastic, so I think there's some big wins here. I think we have a question from someone. How much is the cap for Shred payback? Oh man, is there a limit on how much free money we can get from Shred?
It is extremely high. So there's a limit of 3 million in expenses and then you drop down to a lower rate. But in theory, there are companies that claim many, many, many millions of shred. So not a cap, especially not for, startups or scale ups. Really, it's not. It's more so for companies like huge banks that are doing research and development that, reach that limit. But the average size shred claim is around 150,000. And usually companies don't claim if it's smaller than around 20 or 30, it doesn't, companies usually choose to not file. But then on the higher side, there's really not a limit.
Yeah, and
If
and
you're
I
up,
can sh Oh, sorry, go ahead, Lauren.
I was just gonna say, if you're up at that limit, you've been filing shred for years and years. Those are for really large organizations. Yeah.
Hopefully you have processes in place for those
Yeah, hopefully you have
multi-million
bookkeeping in
dollar
place if you're at
shred
the
claims.
$1 million
But
shred.
the context I was going to add is that like, we handle the finances for like a lot of startups and SaaS businesses and tech startups or whatever. And I can assure you that, not all of the money that these startups have come from venture capitalists and private equity. Like it's
Mhm.
about stacking these kind of things. It's about getting a couple hundred grand from SR&ED. It's about getting maybe some IRAP funding. It's about
Yeah.
getting maybe a little bit from a BDC kind of like loan, or
Hmm.
getting some sort of grant from somewhere else. And so SR&ED is a big part of technology companies. Like it is, if you didn't know about SR&ED before, like this is a big moment for you because you can make decent claims to actually be able to help fund your business as it scales without needing to dilute your equity.
Yeah.
And
Shred, so I was
and
just
you
gonna say,
don't need revenue to get SR&ED. Like you
yeah.
don't need to like have even product market fit. So
Mhm.
this is the perfect time to do
You
that.
just need to have expenses.
Yeah.
That's kind of the core of it. And yeah, Shred gives over 4 billion a year to companies in Canada. It's the largest program in Canada to fund businesses. Yeah, it's really quite lucrative if you know how to take advantage of it. So hopefully we helped you understand it a little better today.
We got another question here. Almost all of our company activity in 2025 was R&D. Oh man. So does
Amazing.
that make sense to count all costs as SR&ED? Ooh, well,
Yeah.
not exactly, maybe, but all right,
Yeah,
yeah.
so sometimes R&D is shred and sometimes R&D is not shred. So it really relates back to that core definition I gave of shred, which is that there has to be a clear technical uncertainty and there has to be a systematic investigation to address that uncertainty. So sometimes R&D is fairly standard, you're following a fairly standard practice, and it's more so just for the sake of, slightly improving something or building a platform. There's parts of R&D that, the average person would classify as R&D, but that for the sake of shred, don't involve that experimentation and that iterative style of problem solving, which is required to be eligible. So definitely think that we should have a conversation based on a couple of questions you've put in. It sounds like likely yes, but always you kind of need to dig a little deeper and have a conversation with an expert to really understand what is and isn't shred eligible.
Awesome.
So
I feel like
yeah,
this is good. I think hopefully people are learning from this, from people's
yeah,
questions. So if you
yeah,
have your own questions, ask them. We only have a few more minutes here, so just throw it in here. We'll get to it. Um,
and yeah, kind of the main thing Eric and I wanted you to take away from this session is it's better to be sustainable and build sustainable practices than perfect practices. I think relating to both what I and Eric were talking about around shred tracking and accounting and bookkeeping, there's no such thing really as perfect, but you need systems, and without systems and, habits, it'll fail. So with several folks on the call here being new to shred or not filing yet, this process is a first iteration. We improve every year, we get better every year. But this hopefully gave you a lot of great takeaways that you can implement starting today to track better and do a better job of, keeping track of your expenses in your shred. Having those clean finances create the freedom to scale. When you have more non-dilutive funding, as Eric was mentioning, you can recycle this. You get a shred refund for 50 grand. You can then go hire someone, and then your shred claim for the next year is 100 grand. Then you can go hire someone else, right? Like these expenses and these programs, they recycle and they snowball. So once you get to the point where you have this financial clarity, you have clean financial books, you've clean, systems, you can it's easier to get funding. It's easier, to attract investors. It's easier to get more shred. It's easier to get these other programs like IRAP or MyTax, right? So there's kind of this snowball effect. You also you don't have as much losses, like Eric was mentioning. Sometimes things are leaking through the cracks that you're unaware of when you're not tracking. So these clean financials just really create the freedom to scale and get investors and grow your business in 2026. So I'll jump to the next slide here, but as Eric mentioned, he built that checklist for you guys. So that is definitely a really valuable asset. Don't just download it and not look at it. It really is something meant for you to go through and, look at and use as a resource. So use that. Um, Again, if you have shred questions, if you want to talk more specifically, I'm always happy to have a conversation, free consultation, of course. Excuse me, I've got my QR code there. You can just scan that and book a chat with me. At GrowWise, we really specialize in simplifying the shred claim process. We've built our AI-driven platform to focus on reducing the time, the effort, and the stress required from our clients on their side of things to file for shred. So that, simplifies the tracking process throughout the year with our AI agent that can call you and keep records. We also have that ability to digest all of your documentation in whatever form it is and piece together that shred puzzle from different formats and different information, and really just focusing on simplifying this process for you. So that's what we do. We help clients in all industries and all verticals. We have clients that are just a few folks in their company, all the way up to hundreds of people in their company. So we help across all verticals across Canada in accessing Shred. So please book a call. Even if you're really early and you're not yet ready for Shred, book a call. We'll talk about it. We'll get you your systems in place. We'll get you understanding the timelines and the processes around Shred. So always happy to have a call. My email's there as well if you'd like. And I'll pass
Yeah.
it over to Eric.
Yeah, I mean, we help with finances, so we help with like people's books. We know it's a lot of work to keep your books organized for Shred. If it's daunting to you, we can do it for you. We are really good at this. Like we basically make Lauren's job a lot easier. We lower
Yes.
the stress for our clients because it's just actually maximizing everything right from the get-go. We're setting up processes, making sure we're getting documentation, whether that's physical receipts, or digital receipts, all of that kind of stuff. We're giving you the right reporting on an ongoing basis. We can do, profitability by division, profitability by product line, all of those things. One of our main niches is SaaS and tech companies, so we're very, very familiar with the terminology, with how that world works. We're regularly at SaaS North and other. Actually, Lauren's also at SaaS North,
Yeah,
and so we're very, very familiar with that world. I'm happy to jump on a call, no kind of like stress or obligation. Truthfully, having these little chats like afterwards that are one-on-one are probably the biggest joys that I have in my work, because I could be at home doing little tax returns, or I could kind of like bounce ideas and have fun with business owners. I would much rather do that. So
me
do
too.
me a solid. Let's have a chat so we can just have some fun and talk about things. You don't have to kind of no pressure kind of thing.